Has this ever happened to you? Someone pulls back, creates distance, acts like they couldn't care less, and yet something in your gut keeps whispering that they actually want you to reach out first. If you've ever been tangled up with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, you already know this feeling intimately. They push you away with one hand while quietly hoping you'll fight to close the gap with the other. Today we're going deep into this confusing, contradictory world of avoidant attachment, and I want to walk you through 6 specific behaviors that actually mean an avoidant person is silently hoping you'll be the one to reach out. These aren't the obvious signs everyone already talks about. These are the subtle, almost invisible signals that most people completely overlook. If you've been stuck wondering whether to reach out or give them the space they claim to want, this is going to give you the clarity you've been searching for. So let's get into it. Let's start with something that happens constantly, but almost nobody ever names it out loud. An avoidant person will go completely silent with you directly, and yet somehow they're everywhere on social media at the exact same time. They're posting stories, liking their mutual friends' content, leaving comments on random unrelated posts, making absolutely sure their digital presence is visible everywhere except in your actual messages. This isn't accidental. This is calculated visibility, carefully engineered, even if they'd never admit that to themselves. When an avoidant does this, they're creating what I like to call breadcrumb presence. They want you to know they're still out there, still alive, still very much thinking about the shared world you both used to inhabit together, but they can't bring themselves to reach out to you directly because that would require actual vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like weakness to someone wired this way. The psychology underneath this is genuinely fascinating once you see it. They're essentially communicating something like, I need space right now, but I also need you to know I haven't vanished completely. It's their way of keeping the door cracked open just enough without ever having to be the one who physically opens it. They're hoping, almost desperately, that you'll notice their activity and read it as an invitation to check in on them. Pay close attention to the timing too. If they're posting things that echo inside jokes you two shared, places you went together, interests you used to talk about for hours, that's not coincidence. That's communication through implication, a language avoidants speak fluently even when they refuse to admit they're speaking it. Think about it this way for a second. If someone genuinely wanted to move on and forget you entirely, they would either disappear completely from social media altogether, or they simply wouldn't care one way or another about maintaining any visible presence in your orbit. But an avoidant who's secretly hoping you'll reach out will make absolutely sure you can see them without ever having to be vulnerable enough to contact you first. They'll watch every single one of your stories obsessively while never once reacting to them. They'll post content at the exact times they know you're usually scrolling. They might even post things that are subtle callbacks to your history together, quietly testing to see whether you'll notice and respond. This entire pattern is rooted in their core wound, wanting real connection while simultaneously fearing the intimacy that comes bundled with it. Social media hands them the perfect middle ground, a place where they can feel connected to you without ever risking real emotional exposure. Here's the second one, and it's sneaky, incredibly common, and almost always overlooked. An avoidant will suddenly start asking mutual friends about you out of nowhere. They'll casually drop questions like, how are they doing lately? Or have you talked to them recently? They might even share something about their own life specifically to people they know will relay it straight back to you. This is indirect communication at its absolute finest. Why do they behave this way? Because it gives them information without any real risk attached to it. They get to find out how you're doing, whether you're moving on, whether you're angry, or whether you still care, all without ever exposing themselves emotionally in the process. It's basically emotional espionage. But here's the key detail that gives them away completely. If they didn't want any kind of connection, they simply wouldn't be asking at all. The fact that they're checking in on you through other people means you're still very much occupying space in their mind. They're too scared to reach out directly, so instead they build these little indirect information channels, hoping that somehow, through the grapevine, the message eventually reaches you that they still care, even if they never said it themselves. If mutual friends start telling you that this person was asking about you, that's not random or coincidental. That's an avoidant waving a small flag from a safe distance, hoping you'll notice it and move a little closer. What makes this particular behavior so revealing is the frequency and the level of detail in their questions. If they're simply being polite, they might ask once, in passing, without much follow-up. But if they're repeatedly bringing you up in conversation, asking specific questions about what you're doing, who you're seeing, how you've been feeling lately, that's someone who is deeply invested, but far too afraid to show it directly. Sometimes they'll even disguise their genuine interest by framing it as concern or casual curiosity. They might say something like, "I just want to make sure they're doing okay," or "I was just wondering how they've been handling everything lately." This gives them plausible deniability while still getting exactly the information they're desperately craving underneath it all. The mutual friend, often without even realizing it, becomes an unwitting messenger caught in the middle of this whole complicated dance of avoidant attachment, quietly carrying information back and forth, while the avoidant person carefully maintains their protective emotional distance from you. Now picture this scenario, because it's probably happened to you before. It's late at night, maybe 11, maybe well past midnight, and suddenly your phone lights up with a text. Not a real conversation starter, nothing substantial, just a simple hey or a what's up, or even worse, some random meme or article sent with absolutely zero context attached. This is what I call the testing the waters message. Avoidants tend to send these when their usual defenses are lowered, typically late at night, when they're alone with their own thoughts and their need for connection temporarily wins out over their fear of intimacy. They're not going to send you something heartfelt about missing you, because that would feel far too vulnerable and exposed. Instead, they send something that keeps plausible deniability fully intact. If you respond, they get the connection they were quietly craving all along. If you don't respond, or if you seem upset by it, they can easily retreat and say something like, "I was just sending a meme, don't read into it too much." But here's what they're actually communicating underneath all of that. "I'm thinking about you, I want to talk to you, but I need you to do the heavy lifting here, because I'm still too afraid to put myself out there completely." The timing here matters more than people realize, because late at night is generally when all of us tend to be more emotionally honest with ourselves, avoidance included. If someone avoidant is reaching out during these particular hours, even with the bare minimum of effort, it usually means their longing for connection has temporarily overpowered their fear of it, at least for that one fragile moment. During the day, they're distracted by work, by social obligations, by the general noise and business of everyday life. Their logical, rational mind stays firmly in control, and they can talk themselves into believing that maintaining distance is absolutely the right choice for both of you. But at night, especially in those quiet, still hours right before sleep finally takes over, the emotional truth becomes much harder to keep suppressed. Loneliness hits differently in the dark. Memories become sharper and more vivid than they were an hour earlier. All their careful rationalizations for staying away start to feel thin and hollow. That's exactly when they reach for their phone and send that low-effort message, quietly hoping you'll read between the lines and interpret it as the invitation it actually is. Some avoidants will even go back and delete these messages later if you don't respond quickly enough, embarrassed by their own momentary vulnerability and hoping to erase any evidence that they needed you at all. This next one tends to catch people completely off guard every single time. You haven't heard a single word from them in weeks, maybe even months, and then out of nowhere they send you a full life update. They got a new job, they moved into a new apartment, something significant happened with their family, or they accomplished something they're genuinely proud of. Why would they tell you this specific thing while they've clearly been maintaining so much distance from you otherwise? Because they want you to still be part of their life, even if they can never fully admit that to themselves, let alone say it out loud to you. Avoidants are remarkably skilled at compartmentalizing their relationships. They can want space from real intimacy while still, at the same time, wanting you present for the significant moments that matter to them. When they share these little updates with you, what they're essentially saying underneath it all is, you still matter to me. I still want you to know what's happening in my life. I still see you as someone genuinely important to me. Think about it honestly for a second. You don't share meaningful life updates with people who feel irrelevant to you. You share them with people whose opinion you actually value, whose support you quietly want, whose presence in your life still matters more than you're letting on. This is an avoidance way of keeping the relationship thread alive without pulling it too tight or asking for too much all at once. They're giving you an opening to respond, to show that you care, to re-engage on some level, all while carefully maintaining the illusion that they're just sharing casual news with an old acquaintance. If you ever receive one of these updates out of nowhere, understand it for exactly what it really is. An invitation to re-enter their life, quietly disguised as casual, unimportant information. The specific nature of the update also tells you something meaningful about their emotional state underneath it all. If they're sharing an achievement, they want your validation and your pride reflected back at them. If they're sharing a challenge or a difficulty instead, they want your support and your concern, even if they'll never come right out and explicitly ask for it. Sometimes these updates arrive with a seemingly casual question tacked onto the end, something like "How have you been?" or "What's new with you these days?" This is their quiet attempt to restart an actual dialogue without making it obvious that's exactly what they're doing. They're creating a natural conversational opening that feels far less risky than saying something as exposed as "I miss talking to you" or "I've been thinking about you constantly." The simple fact that you're the person they chose to share this information with out of everyone else they know is genuinely significant. It means you still occupy a special place in their emotional and mental landscape, even if their avoidant tendencies won't let them acknowledge that directly to your face. Coincidences happen sometimes, sure, but when they keep happening again and again, they eventually stop being coincidences at all. An avoidant might suddenly start showing up at places they know you frequent, the coffee shop you always stop at, the gym at the same time you usually work out, social events they know for a fact you'll be attending. They'll play it completely cool when they see you, acting genuinely surprised with an "Oh hey, what are you doing here?" But it's not a surprise at all. It's engineered proximity, planned out carefully, even if they deny it if you ask directly. This particular behavior reveals something crucial about what's actually going on underneath. They want to see you, but they need it to look natural and unplanned on the surface. That way, if the interaction goes well, wonderful, mission accomplished. But if it feels awkward, or you seem uninterested in engaging, they can simply tell themselves it was just a random chance encounter, and their ego stays fully protected either way. Avoidants crave connection deeply, but they also fear rejection just as deeply, so they engineer these seemingly accidental opportunities for interaction instead of just asking directly for what they want. They're hoping that simply being in your physical space again will naturally lead to conversation, to some kind of reconnection, without them ever having to explicitly reach out and risk being turned away outright. Pay close attention to the patterns here, because they matter more than they seem to at first glance. If you keep running into this person in situations that require them to go noticeably out of their way to be there, that's not the universe conspiring to bring you two back together. That's an avoidant person quietly trying to create opportunities for you to reach out to them, all while still maintaining their protective shield of emotional distance from a safe arm's length. Sometimes this particular behavior becomes almost comical once you notice how transparent it really is. They might suddenly develop an interest in activities they never once cared about before, but that you happen to be genuinely passionate about. They might start shopping at stores they previously never set foot in, but that you frequent regularly. They might start accepting invitations to events they would normally turn down without a second thought, simply because they know for a fact you'll be there too. What they're really doing, whether they'd admit it or not, is creating a stage for organic interaction, hoping that physical proximity alone will accomplish what their emotional courage still can't. They want to see your face again. They want to gauge your reaction to seeing them unexpectedly. They possibly want a conversation that feels spontaneous and natural rather than obviously planned out in advance. This whole approach lets them maintain their sense of independence and emotional control while still actively pursuing connection with you underneath the surface. If these encounters keep happening and they always seem just a little too prepared, a little too put together, a little too conveniently timed, you're witnessing an avoidant working very hard to make reaching out unnecessary by making running into each other feel completely inevitable instead. And here's the final one, and honestly, it might be the most telling sign of all six. An avoidant can maintain their carefully constructed distance and seem totally fine with it, right up until the moment they hear through the grapevine that you're actually moving on with your life. Maybe you're dating someone new. Maybe you genuinely seem happy without them for the first time. Maybe you've simply stopped asking about them altogether. Suddenly, out of nowhere, they're not so comfortable with all that distance anymore. You might notice their social media activity spike dramatically overnight. You might get that random text out of absolutely nowhere after weeks of total silence. They might start reaching out to mutual friends far more frequently than before, quietly fishing for information about your new situation. Some will even reach out to you directly with obviously transparent excuses, needing something they supposedly left at your place, or asking a quick question about something that could have easily been resolved without ever involving you at all. This particular reaction exposes the underlying truth better than almost anything else could. They wanted space, not an actual loss. They wanted distance, not full abandonment. The entire time they were pulling away from you, they were quietly operating under the assumption that you'd simply still be there waiting whenever they finally felt ready to come back. This is perhaps the clearest sign of all six that an avoidant genuinely wants you to reach out, because their whole behavior shifts dramatically the second they sense you might not be available to them anymore. Fear of loss suddenly becomes stronger in that moment than their usual fear of intimacy. And that's precisely when their true feelings finally rise to the surface, whether they want them to or not. If an avoidant person seems noticeably bothered or suddenly far more present than usual, the moment they sense you're genuinely moving on with your life, they're essentially showing you, without saying it outright, that they never actually wanted you to leave for good. They just needed you to stay patient while they slowly worked through their own fear at their own pace. The underlying psychology behind this reaction is rooted deeply in their original attachment wounds. Avoidants often experienced inconsistent caregiving somewhere back in childhood, which led them to internalize the belief that depending on other people is fundamentally dangerous. So as adults, they create distance instinctively to protect themselves from that same old danger resurfacing. But that distance was always meant to be temporary and controlled on some level, a way to regulate their own nervous system, not a permanent goodbye they actually wanted to happen. When they finally realize you might actually be gone for good this time, it triggers a genuine panic response that overrides their usual avoidant patterns completely. Suddenly, the person who needed all that space is showing up with real urgency. The person who couldn't seem to commit to anything is now questioning why exactly you're moving on without them. The person who insisted they weren't ready is suddenly wondering out loud if there's still some kind of chance left for the two of you. This dramatic, almost jarring shift reveals something important that's easy to miss in the moment. Their avoidance was never really about not caring about you at all. It was always about caring too much and simply never learning how to safely handle the vulnerability that comes bundled together with caring that deeply about someone. So there you have it, 6 subtle but genuinely powerful signs that an avoidant person is actually quietly hoping you'll reach out to them, even while their surface behavior seems to be pushing you steadily away. Remember this above everything else: avoidant attachment is rooted in fear, not in some fundamental lack of feeling. These are often people who care very deeply underneath it all. They're just genuinely terrified of what fully caring might mean for them and their sense of safety. Now, once you've noticed a few of these patterns for yourself, it's worth pausing before you rush to act on any of them. Recognizing these signs isn't the same thing as knowing exactly what to do with them, and that distinction matters more than people give it credit for. Just because someone is quietly hoping you'll reach out doesn't automatically mean reaching out is the right move for you personally. It just means you finally understand what's actually happening underneath the surface, instead of being left confused by mixed signals that never seemed to add up before. One thing worth sitting with is how exhausting this whole dynamic can become if it repeats itself over and over without ever actually changing. Decoding breadcrumbs, tracking timing, noticing patterns in who's asking who about what, all of that takes real emotional energy that could be spent somewhere far healthier if the relationship simply doesn't evolve past this stage. An avoidant person can stay in this exact holding pattern indefinitely if nothing forces them to confront it directly. They can keep sending late-night texts, keep liking old photos, keep showing up in the same coffee shop for months, sometimes even years, without ever actually closing the emotional distance in any meaningful way. That's worth being honest with yourself about, because hope alone won't necessarily change that outcome. It also helps to remember that noticing these signs doesn't obligate you to interpret every single one of them as proof of some deeper devotion. Sometimes a late-night text really is just boredom. Sometimes checking in with a mutual friend really is just casual curiosity with nothing else behind it. Context matters enormously here. The value in learning these patterns isn't to turn you into someone who over-analyzes every text and every story view, searching for hidden meaning. It's to help you recognize the difference between someone who has genuinely moved on and stopped thinking about you altogether versus someone who is still deeply entangled emotionally but too frightened to say so directly. Those two situations look completely different once you know what to look for, and confusing them tends to keep people stuck far longer than necessary. If you do decide that reaching out feels right for you, it's worth going in with clear eyes about what you're actually asking for. Are you hoping this person will finally meet you with the same openness you're offering? Or are you simply hoping the discomfort of not knowing will finally end? Both are valid reasons to want clarity, but they lead to very different conversations. Someone who has done real internal work around their attachment patterns might be capable of meeting you honestly if you open that door. Someone who hasn't done that work yet might simply repeat the same cycle of pulling close and pushing away the moment things start to feel too real again. Watching how they actually respond, not just in the moment but over time, tells you almost everything you need to know about which situation you're actually in. And if you decide that the healthier choice for you is to not reach out at all, that's just as valid a response to everything we've covered today. Knowing that someone is quietly hoping you'll make the first move doesn't mean you owe them that move. Sometimes the most self-respecting thing you can do with this information is simply let it confirm what you already suspected, and then use that confirmation to finally give yourself permission to stop waiting on someone who may never fully show up the way you deserve. Clarity isn't just useful when it leads you back towards someone. It's just as useful when it finally gives you permission to walk forward without them. It's also worth pointing out that none of these 6 behaviors exist in isolation most of the time. In real life, they tend to overlap and reinforce each other. The person who's been quietly liking your old photos is often the same person whose friends mention they've been asking about you. The late night text often shows up right around the same time they start turning up in places you frequent. When you start seeing 2 or 3 of these patterns happening together, that's usually a much stronger signal than any single behavior on its own. One late night text could mean almost anything. A late night text combined with suddenly reappearing at your gym, combined with a friend mentioning they asked how you're doing, that's a pattern, and patterns are far more reliable than isolated incidents. It's also worth thinking about your own role in all of this, not from a place of blame, but from a place of honesty. If you've been the one consistently decoding, analyzing, and waiting for these signals, it might be worth asking yourself what that waiting has been costing you emotionally. Attachment dynamics are rarely one-sided. Sometimes the person doing all this decoding has their own reasons for staying in a holding pattern too, whether that's fear of starting over, comfort in the familiar, or simply hope that things will eventually click into place without either person having to change. None of that makes you wrong for wanting connection. It just means the healthiest path forward usually involves being honest with yourself about what you actually need, not just about what the other person's behavior seems to be signaling. At the end of the day, understanding avoidant attachment isn't really about decoding someone else's psychology so you can win them back or prove they still care. It's about giving yourself enough information to stop taking their behavior personally, to stop assuming their distance means you did something wrong, and to start making decisions from a place of clarity instead of confusion. Whether that clarity leads you back toward this person or gently away from them, either outcome is a win, because either way, you're finally choosing with your eyes open instead of reacting blindly to signals you never fully understood before now.